everybody, my name's Gary Jackson, and today we are going to be talking about how to bait-proof your dog. Now, bait-proofing is a very, very important thing to do with your dogs because I've seen a lot of reports that there's a lot of baiting happening around the world. Now, the people that are doing this are basically just vile skid marks on the undies of society. Anyone that does this to a dog, and we've seen it happening at dog parks where people are complaining about a barking dog and they throw a bait over the fence, or they want to get rid of dogs. So it's happening everywhere. So here's some advice on how to bait-proof your dog. Now, many years ago when we had the kennels, we'd have people come in to say, my dog is completely bait-proofed. And I'll say, okay, and they'll say, all right, you have to put your hand up like this. You've got to say to the dog, sit, put the meal down, and then say, abra bloody cadabra, and then the dog will eat his meal. And if you don't, he won't eat for 5 days straight. So we had to go there and do it. So the first thing that we did, we put a meal down in front of the dog like anyone else and just walked away. And every single one of them ate their meal and was not bait-proofed. Then when I go back in the kennel the next day to feed him again, I'll put the meal down stand in front of him, and the dog was perfectly bait-proofed. He was responding to the finger, the abra bloody cadabra, and the dog ate. So he was responding as a bait-proof dog, only eating on command because of the theatrics and the training that you're doing with me present, but away from the person present, the dog was completely and totally not bait trained at all. So let's go into a few tips, and it's really 5 steps to be able to bait train the dog. And this is what we did over the years. So I hope this helps you out a little bit. Now, back in the 70s, I used to watch my father bait proof a lot of the industrial dogs, and he would set up a battery. He'll run a wire to a Vegemite tin lid. Remember them in the 70s? The tin lids were actually, it was tin, a Vegemite tin lid. And he'll run the wire to that, strap on a bit of steak, and leave that in the industrial yard. And as the dogs came in, the dog will go and smell the steak, get a zap, and won't go anywhere near it. It was fast and effective, and no one was present when the dog was when the dog went to grab the steak. So the dog learnt not to take food off the ground extremely quickly. So I'm just going to give you a bit of advice on the steps that you can do to bait-proof your dog. Now, step 1. What you can do is, first of all, teach your dog to sit and stay. So you put the dog in a sit-stay position here, tell him he's a good boy for sitting and staying, and if he gets up, teach him the word or no, place him back in the sit-stay, or a small correction on a collar or a check chain, okay? Oh, it's a correction, so the positive dog training extremists aren't going to like that one, but I've never seen a bait-proof dog that's worked on positive training only. There you go. So you put the dog in a sit stay, he gets up, you go up, make him sit there and stay there again. Tell him he's a good boy. Then from there, you'll introduce distractions. And this might be a tennis ball. Bounce a ball, the dog goes, wow, the ball's there, I want to get it. He jumps up to get the ball. You correct him for breaking the sit stay. Then from there, you do the same thing with food. Put food in front of him, put some Scooby snacks a foot away from him. Do whatever you can to get that dog to break the sit stay, introduce it slowly, and then increase the distractions. Then that sit-stay is overriding all these different things you're throwing at the dog, whether it be fears, phobias, aggression, distraction, whatever it is, and that sit-stay overrides it. So that is step number 1. Now, let's see how we feed the dog. The first thing that we do is that we feed the dog out of one particular bowl, and you make the dog sit down because he knows the sit-stay, he knows the up, make him sit there and stay, then go to put the meal down. The moment he gets up to get some food, sit. In a lot of cases, you just have to use up and the dog go back into the sit. If you find that you put the meal down again and the dog just wants to get up and get to the meal, then use a second person to put the meal down. You put the check chain and lead on the dog, make him sit there and stay. The second person puts the food down. The moment the dog gets up to go, you can actually correct the dog and make him sit stay. Once you've got that sorted, then introduce a word, whether it's a code word, whatever it is, make him sit stay. Don't use a word like it's okay because everybody uses it. Use a word like tucker as an example. So the dog's in the sit stay there, the meal's down, he's salivating, wanting his meal, and you'll say, good boy, Tucker, and the dog gets up and eats. Good boy, Tucker, Tucker, good boy. And do that, and eventually what will happen over a period of days, you'll come out with food there, that dog slams his butt in the ground, is sitting there, you put that meal down, he's salivating, he's sitting there, and he will not touch it until he hears that word, Tucker. So that's the second step that you do. Now, once a dog, and this is done continually, it's not just like a few days and that, he has to sit down, he has to stay, he does not eat till he hears that word. Now that's a conditioning that you do. Now, when you've got the dog which is always hanging around the table there, just dribbling, just wanting food and all the rest of it, it's a concept because you're constantly feeding the dog from the table. For example, my dog, when he's never eaten at the table, he doesn't hang around the table. So if I see him on something to eat, he runs in the laundry and stands over his bowl because he only knows that his food comes from that bowl. So he'll never hang around me. So that's another little tip. Okay, so the next step is step 3. And what you do is that you'll get a bit of food that you don't handle. You can actually have some gloves on if you want, otherwise get someone else to handle it, and put that out in your yard or at a park where you're going to train the dog. Do not just have it on the ground on its own. What you can do is put it under a brick, put it under a bit of board, put it in a tinder block, something like this where the dog can see it, smell it, but can't actually inhale it and just grab it. So you do this. Now the dog already knows the up command, he already knows the correction, he's already sitting there and staying for his meal. Then what you do is that you take the dog, let him do anything he wants to do. You don't do some training because otherwise the heel might override the desire to do it and the dog just walks straight past because you told him to heel. So that's one tip there. So what you do is just put the dog in free time. Good boy, you're a good fella. Walk the dog around, and when he gets to the food there and he starts to smell it and he acknowledges that there's food there, go and pop him a correction and then just continue walking. Do this and then walk around another 5 minutes, come back past it again. You may have to do it a second time, but generally it takes anywhere from 1 to 3 times, and then the dog just goes there, smells the food and just continues walking. So he acknowledges that the food's there, but then continues walking. Then what you do is you, after you've done that a few times and the dog's pretty good there, you then get a stranger or a mate to be able to hand the dog some food. So you've got the dog on, say, a check chain and lead, you have a mate with a bit of bacon, and then from there he goes up to the dog and says, hey fella, do you want some food? And as the dog thinks, oh yeah, bacon, like this, and goes to grab the food, you can go up, pop them a correction like this. It takes, generally when it gets to that stage there with the handing of the food, it's generally only 1 or 2. Then what happens, the person tries to give the dog the food and he's turning his head and he's trying to push the food into his mouth and the dog will not touch it. And this is bacon's. That dog now clearly understands he's not to touch any food, and the only time he gets food is when it's in his bowl and you say the word Tucker and then he eats. Now the most important part of bait proofing a dog. Now most of the time the dog will be completely bait proofed only in your presence, and as soon as a human's gone, the dog's going to take it. And this is why we then using this magnificent life-saving tool called the electric collar, because it will allow us to correct a dog from a distance. The dog will associate with what he's doing at the time and you don't have to be there. How many times in the past with your dog, and dogs that you remember, that the dog is perfect when you're there, as soon as you turn your back, the dog goes and does something you don't want him to do. And that's exactly the same reason they'll do with the bait proofing. They will be perfect in your presence, and as soon as you're gone, they're eating baits off the ground. So the electric collar is an extremely important life-saving device which is going to save your dog. So now the electric collar. When you put the electric collar on, I'm not going to get into too much detail about electric collars because it's going to take too long to be able to go through. But basically, once you've got the electric collar on the dog and you've set out the base correction for him, which you can do in obedience, if not, you use a professional dog trainer to be able to assist you further with that. Now, once you've got got it sorted with the correction level, you may up it a little bit more because you want that dog to get a bad experience, to be totally associated with the bacon or the food on the ground. You don't want the dog to smell the bacon, get the zap and go, hang on, that bacon's more important than the zap. So it has to be a little bit higher so the dog just gets zapped once and he just goes back. So I'm not going anywhere near that again. So what we do, put the electric collar on, we put the food under a basket or something where the dog can't actually get it, but he can see it and he can smell it. Then from there, you put the dog in the yard or a small yard, you send, or you can sit up on the veranda or in the kitchen, electric collar's on, you have the remote control. Then the dog goes out there, walks around, finds where it is there, puts his nose against it and goes, whoa, there's bacon. bang, hit the buzzer and give him a bit of a zap, and the dog's going to jump back. Now, when I say a zap, it's more or less the same form as a correction. You're not going to make the dog do a double somersault and sparks fly out his arsehole. That's like, you know, all the dog training extremists will try to tell you. It's a zap, the dog jumps back, so what the bloody hell was that? And then he'll look at it and go back and he'll check it out again, and he'll go up and check it right out and go maybe have another sniff at it. And then from there, you can actually dial it right down and just do vibration only. So the dog goes, look at it, and then all of a sudden it goes, zzz, just with vibration. There's no correction. The dog goes, geez, it's happened again. And what will happen is that the dog learns to show avoidance of food on the ground without you there. So now he's not touching food on the ground with you there or without you there. Now do that several times, but you do it in different locations, use different types of food, set it up, and then like go to a friend's place, do the same thing there. On the street, do the same thing where you've got the electric collar and you might have the dog on a harness, he's got the electric collar on, and then just set up a bit of food you know, on your walk there. So basically what you want is that dog to ignore it. Yep, there's food, there's bacon, I'd love to get it, but he knows he's not allowed to eat it. The final step is to have other people try to feed the dog, and the dog might be on his own in the yard without being on the end of the lead, because we know the dog's not going to take food while he's on the lead and the owner is there. So now the dog's in the yard, you have a friend comes in there and says, hey fella, how you going? Or through the fence, and then go to offer him some bacon for the dog. Dog goes and has a sniff, and you jolt him again with the electric collar. Now all these steps are one of the most successful ways on how to bait proof a dog. We've been doing it this way at the kennels for 25 years. It's been absolutely perfect. I've never ever bait proofed a dog by using positive training methods only for the simple reason that you're pretty well set up for failure. But if you're a positive dog training extremist, well, you're against the electric collars, you're against the correction. So when that dog takes a bait, then what you've done is that you've put your ideology above the pain and suffering of that dog when he takes a bait, okay? Positive dog training extremists, what are you going to do? Ignore the problem like you do everything else, or are you going to give the dog a Scooby snack for not taking the bait? Anyway, I'm Gary Jackson, and that was a little bit of advice on bait proofing your dog. And it's important. Electric collars are life-saving devices. If you can't use one, or you haven't got one, you can get a professional to be able to give you a hand there. The end result is that your dog is not going to take baits and your dog is going to survive. Anyway, bye for now.